My name is Rachel Brown, and I'm 46 years old. My husband, David, is the same age. He grew up with a silver spoon, as his father is the president of a bank. David's father, Charles Brown, the president of Brown Bank, is well known for being incredibly strict and harsh. Our marriage wasn't bad until recently. We used to go shopping together and had similar tastes, so we weren't one of those couples who constantly clashed. But then one day, David came out with this.
I have a love child with my mistress, so I'm going to marry her. Actually, I never officially married you, so no need to split the assets. Now, it's time for you to leave.
Seeing David so full of confidence, I burst out laughing. I couldn't stop myself. I was laughing so hard I held my stomach. David, who had been taken aback, started getting angry.
What's so funny? What's got you laughing like that?
Well, okay then. If that's how it is, I'll go ahead and close the $500 million account in your bank.
What are you talking about? Closing the account? And $500 million? You're not even the daughter of a CEO. What are you saying? I guess this heat wave finally made you lose your mind.
As David continued ranting, I, still laughing with tears in my eyes, explained. It's my great Uncle Mike's company, Smith Imports, that has $500 million deposited in Brown Bank. Charles should be well aware of that. That's why someone like me, not a CEO's daughter, was able to marry the bank president's son. You may think we didn't file our marriage certificate, but we definitely did, so no need to worry about that.
What? What the hell are you talking about? Smith Imports? That's one of the long-established companies around. And you're claiming to be connected to them? Don't make me laugh. We were never on the same level, even from birth. You and I don't belong together. You've seriously lost your mind. And like I said, we're not even legally married. After I signed the marriage papers, I threw them away secretly after saying I'd filed them.
You really thought that for the last 10 years? Ridiculous. Do you really think someone as serious as Charles would overlook that? At first, I was shocked when I realized the marriage papers hadn't been submitted. But do you remember? We filled out 2 copies of the papers, and Charles kept one as a keepsake. Don't you remember that? Seriously? You don't remember filling out 2 copies? And how happy Charles was? Finally, his troublesome son was getting married. I spoke with Charles and submitted his copy. So yes, we're legally married. You didn't even know that? Who's the one who's really lost it here? Have you even noticed that all the mail addressed to me has had the last name Brown on it? And let's see what happens if a member of the Smith family were to get divorced. Obviously, the account would be closed. And do you think you can tell Charles about that? Smith Imports is a top-tier client. They're not like any random company. It's a long-established firm. If they close their account and business slows down, it would be a huge blow to Brown Bank. The bank's reputation could take a nosedive.
There's no way. This is Brown Bank we're talking about. Do you know how long it's been around? It's a major bank. Everything you're saying is a complete lie. Sure, Smith Imports is an old company, but Mike is your great uncle? That's obviously a lie. Someone like you couldn't have come from such a prestigious family. I only married you out of pity. I thought, you won't find someone to marry. So I married you. But you betrayed me. And I'm done with you. You can't even handle household chores. You have no savings. And all you do is watch cartoons. Aren't you embarrassed? The woman I'm seeing now is the one who truly deserves to be the wife of the bank president's son. She's nothing like you, a wife who only cares about money.
You've known about my love for cartoons since before we got married, haven't you? And we don't have a housekeeper because I do everything myself. Can't clean, can't cook, can't do laundry. Really? Then who's been making your lunches? Did a robot make those homemade lunches? And those wrinkle-free shirts you're wearing? Are you seriously going to tell me your mistress was sneaking in while I wasn't home to iron them? Of course not. I did all of that. And you think that excuse is going to fly? Do you really think Charles will bend to your will? Charles, who's strict, accomplished, and hates anything dishonest? The man who values integrity above all else. If anyone's going to get disowned here, it's you. Am I wrong? If I end up being treated unfairly, Smith Imports will definitely take their business elsewhere. And who's going to lose out then? With fewer clients, Charles' wrath will be enormous.
You're full of it. You're not fit to be the wife of a bank president. Who do you think you are? Do you think you're better than me? Fine. If you say we're really married, then sign the divorce papers. Do it. I'll tell my dad we got divorced because of your infidelity. I'll say you had the affair. No one's going to believe anything you say. I'm the son of the bank president. Who's going to believe the words of an old woman like you, who has no backing whatsoever?
At the very least, both Smith Imports and Charles will believe me. The doorbell rings. Maybe our argument has gotten too loud and it's bothering the neighbors. I'll get it. I left the furious David behind and walked to the front door. Yes, who is it? What? When I opened the door, there stood a woman with heavy, garish makeup and a triumphant look on her face, along with a young boy who seemed to be in elementary school. The woman tried to force her way in. I was shoved and fell to the floor. Hey, who are you?
Nice to meet you, Rachel the loser. Hurry up and pack your things and get out. I can't stand to look at your pathetic excuse for makeup. It's disgusting. David, I'm here. It's Victoria, and I brought our son, Thomas. We're moving in today, right?
Hey, who are these people, David?
Hi, my future wife. You came. Thomas, from today, you get to live with Dad.
Really? I'm glad.
David, who are these people?
Well, aren't you scary? Just because you lost, you start yelling? What kind of example are you setting for the kid? So scary.
Hey, you plain-looking lady over there. Pack your bags and get out. My mistress and our kid are here now. The least you could do is offer a drink. Where are your manners? Let me introduce you. This is my new wife, Victoria, and my son, Thomas. He's already 8 years old. I know it's been tough on him, but once you leave, everything will be settled. So get out. I love Victoria.
What am I witnessing right now? A mistress? I could have handled that. But a son? And he's 8? So it was David who had the affair and a secret child, not me. Unbelievable. How could this possibly be allowed? I was furious, but it seemed like stepping back was the best move for now. Just wait, you'll see soon enough. You're the one who's going to take a huge loss and get chewed out by Charles. I went to the bedroom and packed the necessary things, like my clothes. Victoria came over with a nasty smirk on her face.
Oh, Rachel the loser, do you even have a place to stay tonight? You're a failure who couldn't even have children, and yet you stuck around for 10 years. Aren't you ashamed? Well, they say some people are shameless, and you must be one of them, aren't you?
Even though I didn't ask, Victoria kept throwing out her insults, one after another. I realized immediately. This woman is nasty to the core. Her makeup is caked on, and her personality is just as awful. I can't understand what David sees in her. As I finished packing my things and stepped out of the house, David followed me. What? If you have something to say, I don't want to hear it.
Leave the keys. The house keys. Don't come back here again. I don't want Thomas to hear anything about affairs or mistresses.
David said cruel things in such a calm tone. Instead of handing him the keys, I threw them toward the door on purpose.
Hey, you.
I ignored David's string of insults and left the houses. Unfortunately, my family home was pretty far away, and I didn't have my car keys. With no other choice, I called for a taxi. "Excuse me, can you take me to the station?" I took the taxi to the station and then transferred trains until I reached the closest station to my parents' place. Doesn't want the kid to hear about mistresses and affairs, and yet he's throwing his wife out of the house. I was filled with frustration as I headed toward my parents' home. Well, I say home, but it's actually a luxury high-rise right in front of the station. When I arrived at the apartment on the 45th floor, I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. I walked into my parents' home, crying the whole time.
Who's there? Oh, Rachel, what happened? It's so late. Where's David?
I cried in my aging mother's arms. Since my dad was also there, I explained everything that had happened.
That bastard. By year 2 of the marriage, he already had a mistress and their child. We are the Smith family. He won't get away with this.
That's right. We're not just any family. We're an old, respected company with responsibilities. Let's call Mike right away.
You've really been through a terrible time. Poor thing. He has no idea who our family is. He'll regret this soon enough.
My mom called Mike, her brother-in-law and the chairman of Smith Imports. Her cousin is now the company president. My dad, who married into the family, assists with the business. Afterward, Mike, my parents, and I gathered at the house and discussed everything that had happened. So, they kicked me out of the house, his mistress and their child showed up, and they were all happy together. As I vented my frustrations, my family became even more furious than I was. Mike then called David's father, Charles. He angrily demanded a meeting to discuss the matter. The jobs of a bank president is far from leisurely. I heard he was extremely busy, but even so, Charles made time for the meeting. So, even though my parents weren't present, the meeting began with just me, Mike, Charles, and David. Charles glared at David.
What's this all about? A mistress? And a secret child? With Rachel still in the picture?
Well, that's...
Charles, I'm sorry, but I've decided to move Smith Imports accounts to another bank. When can we start the paperwork?
Please wait. There must be some mistake. David may be foolish, but he's not that reckless.
No, my niece's daughter has been insulted. Brown Bank can no longer be trusted. Especially since Rachel, your son's wife, has been working hard, while David here has been playing around with a mistress and a secret child. If this gets out in the papers, it'll be a massive scandal.
Please wait.
Mike remained firm on moving the accounts, while Charles desperately tried to prevent it. The conversation was going nowhere fast. Then David spoke up.
Yes, it's all Rachel's delusions. She's been bad-mouthing me endlessly, and then she just left the house on her own.
I was stunned when I heard him. Even at this point, he was still trying to make excuses. Everyone, there's something I'd like you to hear. With that, I took something out. It's a voice recorder. David's face turned pale. I pressed the play button, and David's shouting filled the room.
Everything you say is a complete lie. Sure, Smith Imports is an old company, but Mike is your great uncle? That's obviously a lie.
The voice recorder captured all the insults from that day.
Victoria's not like a gold-digging wife like you.
Wait, so you're saying Rachel's just after money, David?
No, that's not it. This is fabricated.
There's one more recording I'd like you to hear. Calmly, I played another audio file from the recorder.
Hey, you. You're seriously pissing me off. Don't ever come back here. You're disgusting and the worst. You're completely useless. Thanks for everything, but you don't have a home to come back to. Go ahead and become homeless and live at the bottom of society.
This was the tirade I had endured when I left the house. I had recorded it just in case. When the recording ended, the room fell silent. David's face, which had been pale, was now completely white. Mike, let's change banks. Can we really trust a bank that employs people like him?
No, we can't. Even if we could before, that's no longer possible. Charles, when can we come by to start the process of switching banks? It's unfortunate, but there are several banks eager to work with us. After all that's happened, we can't just let this slide, can we? It's unacceptable for Rachel, who's like a daughter to me, to be insulted and treated this way.
Well, that's...
Charles, who had always carried himself confidently, looked more shaken than I'd ever seen him. Just then, the doorbell rang. My mom, who was stationed at the door, could be heard, but from the sound of it, someone was barging in, completely ignoring her.
David, I'm here. Let's sign the marriage papers.
It was Victoria, clueless about the situation, walking right in.
What's going on here? The atmosphere feels heavy. David, you promised you'd sign the marriage papers today, remember?
How did you find this place? I never told you where I was.
I secretly installed a GPS app on your phone. So, are we going to sign the papers today or what? Stop being so shy. Even Thomas is excited for this.
Good job, Victoria. David's got nowhere to hide now. I couldn't help but silently cheer her on. David, who had been denying the existence of a mistress, was now cornered. I exchanged a nod with Mike. Mike, let's go ahead and switch banks.
Yes, we should.
I called for the staff and had Victoria escorted out.
What? I'm the one who deserves to be with David. I'm way better than a gold-digging commoner like you, right, David?
Victoria was yelling as she was forcibly removed from the house. The meeting room fell silent. No one said a word. Then Mike spoke up.
I looked into that Victoria. Turns out she comes from a poor family. So, who's the real gold digger here? Our family may not have made it to the level of a conglomerate, but we've got a decent income.
When he said decent, it was pure modesty.
In reality, they made more money in a month than most people could even imagine.
Well, instead of rushing into a divorce, why don't we give Charles a chance to handle this? We're so busy that we don't even have the bandwidth to switch banks right now. If Charles can sort things out, we'll forget about changing banks.
Thank you. Please, let me speak with David and Rachel. I appreciate your patience. Though I was filled with anxiety, it was decided that I would return home for the time being. Still, with Charles being so strict, I didn't expect any violence.
If anything happens, contact me immediately.
Yes, thank you, Mike. We got into Charles' personal luxury car. For a while, the three of us, David, Charles, and I, sat in silence as the car continued to drive. The atmosphere was heavy, thick with Charles' anger and David's growing panic.
You idiot.
Suddenly, Charles swung the cane he had been holding and attacked David. Though the car didn't slow down, Charles never lost his balance.
What love for Rachel. You went and had a mistress and a secret child. You're the lowest of the low. You insulted others while ignoring your own sins. Because of you, we nearly suffered huge losses. You'd better be thankful to Rachel, you fool. Don't tell me you forgot. Did you really think Rachel's family was just a bunch of commoners? Even though they never made it to the status of a conglomerate, they still hold immense wealth. Are you trying to sever ties with a family like that?
Charles kept smacking the handle of his cane against David's face while lecturing him. It was painful to watch as David took hit after hit. Even though I was the victim here, I couldn't help but feel a little sympathy for him.
In the first place, you and Rachel had an arranged marriage. It was because you were well matched that this marriage even happened. What were you thinking? I knew you liked to fool around with women, but I never thought you were this terrible. Reflect on your actions, you fool. The marriage was arranged because you were a good match, and you didn't even realize it. You're a disgrace to my family. I'm removing you from your position as the next president of Brown Bank.
No, you can't.
What? Even I was shocked by this. David was born and raised to be the next president of Brown Bank. Losing that position would be a significant blow.
But I've been trained my whole life to be the next president of Brown Bank. What other job could I possibly take? This is too much. Please don't do this.
After everything you've done, what do you expect me to say? I'll appoint one of your cousins as your successor. You almost caused catastrophic damage to the company. Cool your head a little, you idiot.
Charles continued to strike David repeatedly with his cane. Despite being in a moving car, Charles maintained perfect balance, standing firmly without losing his footing. Later, I stayed at the Brown household, but David was kicked out of the houses. He tried to ask me for money, but I instructed the servants Charles had assigned to block him. I divorced David and later remarried his cousin, John. From Charles' perspective, sending me back to my family would have been too risky and damaging. Afterward, John and I got along well, but I started feeling off and decided to visit a gynecologist.
You're pregnant. You're about 8 weeks along.
I was shocked to hear that. I had only recently remarried John. In other words, the baby I was carrying was David's child. John and I decided to tell Charles. Normally, it would be easier to claim the baby was John's, but the timing didn't match. So, I told the truth, that the baby was David's.
What wonderful news. If it's David's child, that means a legitimate heir. Let's make him the future president of the bank.
Charles was thrilled about his first grandchild and began sending boxes full of toys every month. To make things even more exciting, we found out the baby was a boy. Knowing he would be raised to be the bank's heir, I felt an odd pressure. My family's company, Smith Imports, continued to grow and prosper. It kept expanding, becoming more well-known and gaining recognition internationally. As we deposited more money into Brown Bank, Charles became even fonder of me. Later, I heard from an acquaintance that David had been arrested.
What?
Why? John and I were both shocked to hear the news. Apparently, David had still been calling himself the next president of Brown Bank, and that led to his arrest for fraud. However, thanks to Cho's influence, the scandal never made the news. Charles had used his wealth and power to suppress the story. As my belly grew, I found myself feeling increasingly joyful. Even though it wasn't his biological child, John was also excited, and every day he would lovingly rub my belly. Then one day, when I was about 8 months pregnant, something unusual happened. There are 3 servants in this house, all hired by Charles. Charles, in his kindness, hired the servants because he knew I wouldn't be able to manage the cleaning and cooking while pregnant. However, those same servants were now screaming at the entrance. John was at work, training as the future president of the bank. Wondering what was going on, I walked to the front door. What's happening?
Rachel, it's, well, this woman.
What the hell is going on? I was supposed to be living the easy life. Thanks to you, I'm living in poverty. I'm going to sue you.
Standing there was Victoria, looking ragged and disheveled. She reeked, clearly hadn't bathed in some time, and was dressed in filthy, torn clothes. Not wanting to let her into the house, I stood my ground at the entrance. Is that the young woman who cozied up to David for his money? What do you want here? Oh, I see. You've lost, haven't you? How's David doing? You're not together anymore, are you? Well, of course, he's in prison for fraud.
Do you seriously think any child would be happy going from a prestigious private school to a rundown public one? I can barely afford a pencil. You've ruined Thomas's life, you horrible, despicable thief.
But after all, you were just a mistress, weren't you? My family, on the other hand, comes from Smith Imports. We're not like the commoners you're talking about. So, which one of us is the real gold digger here? It's a shame, isn't it? Maybe things could have been different if David were still around, but he's locked up for fraud, isn't he? What are you going to do now, loser? Going to turn to loan sharks to survive? I said this deliberately with a smirk. But I wasn't lying. If the parents are criminals, what do you expect? And really, you should consider taking a bath sometime. Or is that too difficult? It makes me furious to think that someone like you, who can't even bathe, who can't afford a pencil, and who can't survive without a man, almost took the family heir from us. The servants were trying to stifle their laughter.
Don't laugh now.
But Rachel, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, she can't even buy a pencil.
The servants could barely contain their giggles.
What? I was supposed to live a luxurious life, traveling, designer brands, living in luxury. Who ruined it all? You did. You're the one who should be sending me alimony every month. I can't forgive you for what you've done to me.
Forgive me? I'm the one who can't forgive you. You really have no idea, do you? I responded calmly. Do you even understand your position? If things were fair, you'd be the one paying alimony. The only reason you're not is that I feel sorry for your child. You don't even realize that, do you? You approached David for his money in the first place, but you come from a completely different world. Did you really think someone as ordinary and talentless as you could get married into this family, installing a GPS app on David's phone like some kind of stalker? Your head must be full of daydreams. You love luxury, but that just makes you a spendthrift. Why don't you go buy yourself another designer handbag?
Damn it. I'll kill that baby you're carrying. I'll cut it out with a knife. This is all your fault. I can't stand you playing the role of some princess.
I instructed one of the servants to call the police. Victoria didn't have a knife or even a box cutter, but she clearly had murderous intent. She was taken away by the police.
What? I didn't do anything wrong. Why is everyone on her side? What's going to happen to Thomas if I'm arrested? Are you going to let him suffer in poverty? He's used to a life of luxury. He can't live a poor life. This is all your fault. I'll never forgive you.
Victoria was arrested for making threats. It seems that Thomas, left behind, was taken into custody by Child Protective Services. This was because all of his relatives refused to take him in. It's sad he's so young, but with parents like that, what can you do? I couldn't help but think that. Later, I went to the trial for David and Victoria. Neither of them received any sympathy, and both were sentenced to prison.
I've done nothing wrong. I really am the next president of the bank. I didn't deceive anyone. I was planning to pay back the money I borrowed.
David said this as he was escorted out of the courtroom. David pretended to be the next president of the bank and swindled $5 million from his friends and acquaintances. Of course, he couldn't repay it, and after being sued by those he defrauded, he was sentenced to prison. As for Victoria, it turned out she had also committed theft without realizing it. Shoplifting is still shoplifting, but it seems she stole jewelry. She was caught by the staff while trying to swap the real jewels with fakes. While I can't imagine why a jewelry store would allow someone who hadn't bathed in weeks to walk in, I'm more shocked that Victoria couldn't even tell the difference between a life of luxury and a life of crime. In the end, Victoria too was escorted out screaming,
"The jewels are mine. They're all mine. Why am I getting a prison sentence for just this? What about Thomas? I just wanted a normal life."
Her delusional rant left me feeling exhausted. What awful people. I'm ashamed to have been associated with them, even for a moment. Despite everything, the relationship between Smith Imports and Brown Bank remains strong. We never ended up closing our accounts. Charles tried to apologize to me, but I stopped him. "No, Charles, your decisions saved the day. I'm just part of the Smith family. I didn't do anything."
Thank you. I really am sorry.
I later learned that a significant withdrawal of funds could have severely impacted the bank's reputation. Lower deposits also mean fewer business transactions, which would have been a major setback. Thinking back to how desperate Charles had been, I now realize just how much pressure he must have been under at the time. With both David and Victoria in prison, I gave birth to a healthy son. Charles was overjoyed. John successfully became the president of the bank, and the bank's operations are going smoothly. Eventually, I'd like to have another child with John. I want to give our son a little brother or sister. I know it will take some time. Right now, just taking care of this baby keeps me busy, but I still want to give him a sibling someday. Now that Charles has retired from being the bank president, he comes to visit almost every day, bringing toys for my baby. Charles, you're giving him too many toys.
Well, just think of it as a phase. This is all I've got to enjoy right now.
All right, but please make sure the toys are age appropriate. The nurse warned me about that.
Got it. I'll be careful.
Every day is filled with happiness. This is what true happiness feels like. And so, I found my way to a happy life.